All right, well, we'll give this a go. I hate technology. This is going to be hard to do with the camera going up and down instead of across because it's going to be hard for me to get everything in the frame. I don't know why it's not working today like it was the last 3 or 4 times, but it's not. So we'll just make do. So hopefully this works, and we'll see what we can do, what we can come up with. I'll straighten that a little bit so it doesn't look like I'm in a Batman hideout here. Okay, there we go. All right. What does that say? That says it's good. Okay, well, okay, so here we go. So the first drill I did with you was about the catch and how to load and gather water on the blade, getting body weight on the paddle immediately at the catch, and getting the blade buried really quickly at the catch rather than having it travel back a long way before it finally gets buried. And then the other thing that drill did is it helped you keep your hips forward so that when you did catch the water and get it fully loaded with all your body weight on the blade, they would be available to then pull in the catch. And when you do the opposite, I'll come back this way, when you kind of sit back and sit in a chair, which is the opposite of what we're doing, it keeps the weight balanced over your feet, your bum goes out behind you, it's not available to be used in the pull, and you get no weight in the blade, and you tend to take a really long time to get the blade buried. So just to review, we got in our stance, bent legs, we put our ski boots on so we get our knees forward of our toes, we keep our hips forward, we get just a comfortable rotation, and then we fall onto our paddle, right? And that was the drill. That's all it was. The next drill that we did was from that position, we just practiced engaging our hips first and creating a bent shaft to the paddle by using our hips to create that. And we thought about our arms and our upper body as being connectors, connecting our legs and our hips to the water that we have secured in the paddle, or in this case, the paddle blade in the lawn. And then the third drill I showed you, we didn't need the paddle for, and that was just to help you, once you started to pull and had started to engage your hips, it was to pull down towards, with your paddling side hand, towards your paddling side foot, rather than just staying with your hips in one plane and pulling in one plane. It doesn't get very deep. The blade doesn't gather the blade tip doesn't go deeper into the water, gathering undisturbed layers of water as it penetrates the water. And you don't tend to continue to climb on top of the paddle with your body weight during the loading phase. But I mentioned at the end of that video that one of the problems that people have if they load really well is that they get on the paddle and they load, and they get down here and they can't possibly load anymore. So immediately what they should be doing is thinking about unloading, but they stay down here. It's like they get stuck down here and their hands move and their blade moves, but the rest of their body doesn't until the blade's at a really negative angle and past their feet, and then they start to stand up. And oftentimes the blade is actually starting to come out of the water by the time they stand up. They're bringing their hips underneath them and they're standing up. And that's really late. If you do the exit well, you can actually, like in the first part of the stroke when we catch and when we load, we're pulling ourselves to the paddle. And if we do the exit really well, you can actually be pushing yourself past the paddle, right? I'm pushing myself right out of the frame now that the orientation is vertical rather than horizontal. But you can, if you do the exit right, you push yourself right past the paddle. But if you do the exit wrong and you're late unloading, so if you get kind of stuck down here and then your hands move, right? Nothing else but your body, nothing else in your body but your hands moves and your blade travels and starts to come out, and then you stand up. If the blade's out of the water when you start to come up and you start bringing your hips forward, the board actually moves backwards a little bit. It actually goes backwards a bit. And you can see this if you stand on your board in perfectly calm water and just stand on your board in this position with the blade out of the water, and if you stand up suddenly like that, you'll see the board jerks back a bit. And you really notice it if you get in a canoe high kneel position and do it. If you go from this position in your canoe and you are like this and then you sit up like that with the blade out of the water, the boat really jerks back. So anytime body weight is moving forward on your board and the blade's not in the water and supported in the water, the board actually moves back. And we don't want it to move back, even if our board has speed and is moving forward. If there's any forces that are moving our board back, it's breaking some of the forward run of the board, and it's going to be slowing us down a little bit. And if one of the objectives is to carry as much speed as possible between strokes, so that we go faster, and that the next stroke, when we get the blade in the water and start pulling, is easier, then we don't want to do that. We would much rather do the opposite, which is, you know, having the blade secured in the water and actually being able to push ourselves past the paddle as we exit. So let's talk about a drill that will help us do that. So for this drill, you're going to have to hold your paddle down here in the shaft somewhere. It's like a big choke down, okay? And the reason we're going to do that is we want our top hand to be in a position that's similar to where it is when we're standing on our board with our blade fully loaded, okay? So when we're at that point where we've loaded, and we've done our pull, and we're at the deepest part of our stroke, when our hips are behind us, our legs are bent, right? We've used up all our hips for pulling, they can't go back anymore, and the blade is getting really close to our body. The shaft is at a bit of a negative angle. The blade even is at a bit of a negative angle, less so because of the 10-degree offset, but it's at a bit of a negative angle as well. Okay, so we're in this position, and so we're choking down on the shaft so that our hand is sort of in front of our face, which is where it would be if we were on our boards. And in this position, what we want to do is we want to have pressure with our top hand down the paddle shaft to keep the blade stuck in the lawn, or in my case, there's a bit of mud here, thanks to my dogs, so stuck in the mud. Or if we're on our board, it's stuck in the water, it's supported in the water. So there's pressure directed down the shaft with our top hand, and it's just pressure. We're not trying to force it into the ground, it's just pressure that holds it in place. Okay? Just like you would do if you were on your board. The bottom hand is on the paddle, and what we want to do is we want to be able to, just in this position, we want to try to get the blade or the shaft bending. And I don't know if you can see that on the video, if you can see the blade and the shaft of my paddle bending. Hopefully you can. Use the straight boards and the fence behind me as a reference, and hopefully you can see that. So we want to get that bent shaft feel, and that means that we are exerting force against the blade, or against the paddle blade, and that means that if we were on our board, our blade would be working against the water that's loaded on it. So with that bent shaft, what we want to do now is we want to stand up and we want to reload our hips forward underneath our bodies. Okay? So we're going to be standing up and reloading forward and pushing ourselves past the paddle. So we're actually pushing ourselves past the paddle as we come up that stayed stuck in the ground. Okay? So it's kind of like initially, right? Initially you're kind of coming up with your hips, you're coming up with your legs, you're straightening your legs a bit, and you're reloading your hips forward underneath your body. But you're not just standing up. The people who have a hard time with this drill, they just stand up. Well, you're not just standing up, you're almost pulling yourself into a stand up by the pressure that's on your paddle blade. And then you can push yourself forward. You get to a point where you're pulling yourself into that stand up first, and then you can push yourself past the paddle that stayed stuck in the ground. Okay? And that's kind of what you're doing when you're on your board and you're working on your exit. You want to reload your hips forward underneath your body. Think about bringing your hips to your paddling side hand. You're straightening your legs a little bit, and this is one of the reasons it's so important to bend your legs in the pull, because not only does it help you generate more force in the pull, but now you're down here and they're bent, and you can straighten them again. And as you come up against that blade that's fixed in the ground, it's kind of like you can do like a squat against that paddle, and you can then push yourself forward. Look at my blade stuck in the ground here. Okay? When we were at the training camp in Florida, the people that were doing this actually found they were actually kind of lifting themselves up off the ground with their paddle as they went forward. And it's kind of analogous to a pole vaulter running down the track, planting the pole, and levering themselves up over the pole and forward. You're kind of doing this at this in this drill, okay? So I'll do it one more time, facing this way. And then what I'll do is I'll do it towards the camera so you can see it towards the camera. So here I am, pressure down the paddle shaft. I'm in the position that I would be late in the stroke, right? I've loaded and I've just finished loading. I can't load anymore. Most people in this position keep moving their hands and then they come up. And if they do start to come up with the blade still in the water, it's at such a negative angle that it's not pushing them forward as much as it could. If you can start this motion as soon as you finish loading, if you can immediately start to unload, so pressure down the paddle shaft, get that bent shaft feeling, push your hips and your legs against the paddle shaft and push yourself forward. Okay? So I'll try it into the camera now. Let's just see what the comments are here. That's just a bunch of people watching. Hi, Larry. Great lesson for the sprint canoers to watch. Thanks. Yeah, hey, no problem, Joe. Okay, so let's try it into the camera. So here it is into the camera. I'll use the same patch of mud. And so when I'm doing it into the camera, notice that my top hand is over top of my bottom hand, and my body is out over the water a bit. Like I'm not doing this with my blade inside my board or in front of my feet, and I'm not doing it with my top hand inside the board, right? I'm out over the water, like I've caught the water and I've loaded onto the paddle. As I'm loading on the paddle, I'm out of the board and on top of my paddle. So here I am, pressure directed down the paddle shaft. I get that bent shaft going, and I work against that bent shaft with my legs and hips and push myself forward. Okay? So let's talk about the effect of reloading forward and compare it to a motion in another sport that some of you who live in more northern climates are probably familiar with. If any of you cross-country ski, this is really similar, the whole paddling stroke now, to the double poling motion in cross-country skiing. Right? In cross-country skiing, you got a pole in each hand, and you plant the poles. So that's a lot like planting the paddle, and then you load your body weight on against the poles in the ground, and as you're doing it, you're moving yourself forward, right? And you get to a position where your poles are like that, and your hips are up behind you and your legs are bent, and you want to reload them forward. And what you're doing is you bring your hips underneath your body, and you begin to straighten your legs, and you come right up in your bindings so that your toes are up off the, or the only things in the binding, or only things in the ski, your toes and your bindings, and your heels are up off the skis. And for a minute you're like, then you take the poles out, and for a minute you're kind of like in this unstable position, but you're bringing the poles forward, you plant again, and then you go through that process again. You plant, you drive, right? And then you're going to be pressing and reloading forward again. And when you're pressing and reloading forward, it's not just your hips coming underneath you, it's like your legs are pushing up. You're like actually pushing up with your legs. So you're involving the big muscles in your legs as you push off, almost like you'd be doing if you were doing a squat, right? So it's a way to get big power out of your legs. So if we did it from in front, you know, the cross-country skiing motion is, again, the double poling motion is attack with your poles, they plant, you pull yourself forward as you're pushing, and you get to this point here with your poles in the snow, and you're reloading forward and pushing yourself up off the poles. And people, when you watch people do it, the poles come right, their hands loosen up, and they're not even really hanging on to the pole anymore. It's just the strap around their wrist and their thumb, right? And they're in this forward position, and they bring the poles forward and plant for the next double pole motion. And so really the only thing different between the cross-country ski motion and the CEP paddling exit is that we only have one pole, right? So instead of having a pole in each hand, we put like one pole down, we take our free hand now, we put it on the pole that we have, and otherwise it's pretty much the same, right? You're in the exact same position, you're doing the exact same thing, and you're pushing off like that. And then what happens, right, when you push off, you've exited and you've pushed yourself past the paddle, your body is going to be in this forward position, and it's already going to be in this center mass in front of your toes, unstable feeling where you feel like you're going to topple forward position that we tried to get into in the first drill that I showed you, right? Now the paddle's a little bit behind, but it can move really quick through the air and catch up, and then you're back into the next catch. So that's what would happen on the water. Okay, so that's the exit drill, and it's probably the most complicated one. It's the one that people seem to have the most trouble with, and I think the big element that they have a hard time with is, or the reason that they might have a hard time is if they forget the crucial element of blade flex, right? You have to have that flex in the paddle. If you're not working against the paddle flexing, then you're just simply standing up, and that's not going to do anything. But if you're standing up against a paddle that's stuck in the ground or in the beach sand, or more importantly, if we're on our boards that's got pressure connection against the water, then what you're going to be doing is you're standing up against that pressure, and you're bringing your hips forward against that pressure, and you're going to be pushing yourself and the board that you're on or the sprint canoe that you're riding past the paddle, okay? And it's crucial for getting acceleration off the back of your stroke. And you'll know when you're paddling whether you're doing this well or not, because the exit will be the fastest part of your stroke, right? If you look at the acceleration of your board during a stroke, even for people who don't do the exit well, the exit is the time where the board's moving the fastest. Acceleration begins when your blade goes in the water. It increases as you're loading the paddle through the pulling phase, and it maxes out. So if it's a curve, it maxes out when the blade is approximately vertical, and then it starts to decrease. But it doesn't reach zero. Acceleration does not reach zero until the blade's out of the water. You're still accelerating when the blade's back here. You're not accelerating very much, but you're still accelerating. Even if you're doing the exit poorly, you're still accelerating until that time where you jerk the boards backward if the blade is already out of the water. Then you'd actually be decelerating. But if you do the exit well, then you're going to get that point where you're pushing yourself past the paddle. You're going to get this last burst of acceleration that's going to help your board carry a lot of speed between strokes. And you will see this if you do it well. There's things that you can look for on your board that tell you whether you're doing this. You'll see the nose lift up and seem to really surge off the back of the stroke. If you look at the nose wave of the board, you'll see the nose wave from the time that you catch. You should have an impression that the nose is climbing in the water, as boards and craft, motorboats, whatever, they tend to climb in the water as they accelerate. So you'll get the impression that the board is climbing in the water and continuing to climb right off the exit. The bow wave or the nose wave of the board will change color and move a little bit further back on your board. So as your board climbs, the nose wave will go, instead of starting right at the front of the board, will actually move back the board a little bit as the board climbs. And as the as the nose wave moves back on the board a bit, it's also getting a little bit bigger, which means instead of being the color of the water around it, it's actually turning white, you can actually hear it. It goes from being quiet to actually making the sound, like the splashy sound. And essentially what's happening is it's turning white, and it's like a little breaking wave that's coming off the nose of your board. And so the more you can hear it, and the more you see your nose climb, and the more you see it turn white, those are all keys that you're really accelerating. And so if you're seeing that happen off the back of your stroke instead of it just settling back down into the water, then you know that you're doing your exit well and you're carrying a lot of speed off the back of your stroke. And of course that is going to help you go faster, because if you're carrying more speed between strokes, then you're actually going further in the time between strokes, which means you'll cover a given distance faster. But it also means that if you carry more speed, you're going faster. Your board's still moving faster at the next catch than it otherwise would be, and you've got less work to do to get the board back up again. It's already sitting higher in the water than it would be if it fell way back down into the water between strokes. So it's hugely important. And a big thing to look for too, if you get somebody to video you, or you want to put a video on your camera on a tripod or something on a dock and do some paddle-wise, what you're looking for is basically you're looking to see that this motion, this straightening of your legs and hips moving forward underneath your, reloading forward underneath your body, think of your paddling side, hip to your hand, that you're seeing that happen while the blade is still in the water. And the other thing to look for, obviously, is that as soon as you finish loading, that you immediately begin to unload. And if you're seeing, if you see yourself getting stuck down here and just your hands moving, then you've got some work to do on the exit. Okay? So that's the exit drill. Like I offered for the other drills that I've shown, if you would like to get somebody to video you while you do this drill and look for some feedback from me, I'm happy to do that. All you have to do is just post that video in the comments right below this video, and I'll go through the comments and I'll find the video, and then I'll write some, give you some feedback to it. I've already done it to a few people who've done it in some of the other videos, and I'd be happy to do that for you here. You'll find it really makes a difference when you get on your board. You know, knowing what you're looking for in terms of feeling, in terms of timing of how your body's moving, in terms of the position you need to get your body in terms of what you want to feel in your hands, right? In terms of like pressure, you know, tug, and you're feeling the tug in your fingers of a loaded paddle. When you feel those things on land, even though a lot of us aren't paddling for a while, and I'm shut off the water now as well, unfortunately, if you can do these things on land, when you do get back on your board, things aren't going to feel as alien to you, and you'll be paddling, you know, you'll be paddling better in a shorter period of time than you probably were before. This is the best drill, actually, of all the land drills, I think. It addresses a part of the stroke that people struggle with, and you really get to feel, because you actually do pull yourself, you know, your whole body moves in this drill. It's not like the other ones where your body's static and you're just feeling connection. Your whole body's moving here. You're essentially pulling yourself past the paddle, even though you're standing, you know, on the ground. So that's it for today. I hope everyone's doing well, despite the circumstances like I just mentioned. I'm shut off the water now too. Ontario just made an emergency decree which basically closes parks, which is how most people are accessing the water. They didn't say you can't go paddling, but they said you can't do a lot of things that happen in parks, including using park facilities like boat ramps and beaches and things like that. So it makes it hard, and everyone's making sacrifices to beat this thing. So you know, if I can't miss paddling, make that sacrifice and miss paddling for a little while, then I mean, I got to do my share too. So I'm not happy about it, but I'm not happy that people are dying and suffering and losing their jobs and all this other kind of stuff. So it's just terrible. So do this and prepare yourself for those days where you can paddle again. If you still are on the water and fortunate enough to be able to paddle, do this on land, then go test it and see if it helps you on the water. Be safe, everybody. Make good decisions, because it only takes like kind of one mistake of putting yourself in the wrong position, I guess, and you could become infected. So, be safe. And on Friday, I'm back again, and I'm going to take a break from land drills, and I'm going to do a leg circuit with you guys, because I know that there are people now that are looking for work, physical work, fitness work that they can do, given the fact that they can't paddle, gyms are closed, etc. So I'm going to show you a leg circuit. I'm going to get in a bigger space in this, and I'll show you the exercises. I'll show you two extremes, like a entry beginner level, how to do it first without getting hurt, and then I'll show you a more ambitious way to do each of the exercises, and I'll do a round of it with you, and then set you free on your way to try it on your own. So that'll be on Friday at 3. Okay, so I apologize for the technical difficulties today. I'll see if I can figure out why things were the way they were, and wish everybody the best. I'll see you soon.